Zwingli, Zwingli, Zwingli. The reformer who comes last alphabetically and sits right smack in the middle of ranking everyone's favorite Reformation theologians. I say Zwingli sits right in the middle because I think when it comes to Ulrich Zwingli, he's the one reformer who gives everybody something to love and something to hate. He is divisive because of his views, and also we can probably all unite around the fact that there's probably something that everyone has where it comes to Zwingli, where we are just like, bro, what were you thinking? He was brilliant in a way I will never be, and his life story is fascinating, engaging. He's probably second to Martin Luther with the most interesting of stories of the reformers. So it was a pleasure when I saw a new biography on Zwingli being published by Lexham Press. Stephen Eccher comes with the best credentials you could want for someone writing a new biography on Zwingli. He's currently an associate professor of church history and Reformation studies at Southeastern Baptist, and he also holds a PhD from the University of St. Andrews. Zwingli, the pastor, tells the life story of Zwingli with more of a focus on his pastoral labors instead of a wider focus on his role as reformer. Although it's obvious that you can't cover only one and not bring up the other. The two are kind of difficult to separate. But if you have a few minutes, I'd like to tell you about what I thought on this book and how I view Ulrich Zwingli today. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you to wrap your heads around the great characters of church history, please subscribe to the channel in order to stay up to date with the most current reviews. Also, please like this video, give it a thumbs up, and share it with other people online because it's your shares that help others know about Ulrich Zwingli. And thank you again to the Buy Me a Coffee members. Your support allows me to cover the cost of keeping up with these reviews and to be able to put out new videos. And if you're somebody who's been enjoying Rev Reads, you've been benefiting from the videos, I would love for you to consider supporting the channel. You can support it by becoming a member at a starting cost of only $3 a month and then be entered into my drawings to win free books. And I'm going to be giving out a copy of this book to one of the members shortly. So first on this book overall, I found it to be very well written. The author never got lost in pointless details. It moved well from chapter to chapter. Now, Zwingli the pastor doesn't follow the straight chronology of Zwingli's life, but instead goes from topic to topic, albeit in an order that somewhat reflects how his ministry develops. So for example, there was a chapter about the development of divine determinism in Zwingli's theology, his view on God's sovereignty and worldview. There was another chapter on those who partnered with Zwingli in the ministry, and another chapter on those who opposed him. I think this was a good choice to structure the book because it allowed us to see in a single chapter how Zwingli's thoughts developed throughout his ministry in various areas, while another will let us to see the great sweep of his best allies, and another on his shocking, well, they were very shocking to the world at times, changes in worship at Zurich. This is, I believe, the third biography on Zwingli I've read. The other two I read were years ago, and I couldn't even tell you their titles now. But I found this to be an excellent read, even for someone who already felt like they had a decent grasp on Zwingli. And I'd also say I think this would be a fantastic biography if you don't know anything about the reformer and would want to learn about his life. And one of the great benefits of this book is I couldn't imagine an author bringing a more unbiased treatment of Ulrich Zwingli. Overall, this was just a great biography. Not quite up to the level of those put out by Eric Metaxas, but it was very good. This should be widely read. My only complaint, this might be caused more by a lack of information in general, in opposed to the selections made by Stephen Eccher in writing the book, but I would have loved to have seen a little bit more information on Zwingli's personal life. Now, it is mentioned in this book that we know a lot less about Zwingli's home life and pastoral care than we do about Martin Luther, but I would have loved to have learned more information about Zwingli's pastoral care and home life, but I don't think anyone has that information anywhere. Now, at this point of the review, I want to talk about Zwingli for a moment, the man. Not the work of writing this book, which this book was all quality throughout for the biography, but I want to talk about Zwingli. I'm a big fan of Ulrich Zwingli, and I also think he's about the worst. I don't know of another way to put it. I love so many things about him, and I don't know if hate is too strong a word for how I feel about him in other areas. And so one of the things that's really impressive about this book is that I'm not sure how Stephen Eccher feels about him either, because this book wasn't a hit piece, nor was it a book of praise. And part of me was really impressed how he could just trace through Zwingli's life without showing his bias at any point, because I don't know how people can't have very strong feelings about Zwingli, because this was a man who rode the fence on nothing. And it is admirable and infuriating how strong Zwingli was in his views at the same time. So I'll start with the Zwingli I love, and then I'll talk for a few moments about the Zwingli I hate. And I hope that this will give you some ideas of what you'll find in the book in order to pique your interest so you will read it. The Zwingli I love. I love the Zwingli who had a passion as an old school humanist, which meant he went back to the original sources, which led him to go back to the Greek and Hebrew of the biblical text, and to learn from the earliest figures in church history that he could get his hands on, which then in turn inspired my favorite part of his ministry. He preached through the Bible passage by passage and book by book. I owned the complete sermon series set by Martin Luther, but I would much rather have the complete sermon set by Zwingli. Sadly, I don't think such a set exists. Preaching expository sermons and walking straight through the Bible, chef's kiss. Oh, it was awesome. Another thing I love about Zwingli is his love for the people of Zurich. You can see this in how he slow-walked some changes to help those who were sensitive in spirit and had been enchained to the traditions of Rome all their life. His pace at which he made changes showed his love and compassion for those in Zurich. And then Zwingli's love for the average Swiss soldier was also apparent. And then you have Zwingli contracting the plague while he was ministering to the sick. All of this showed that he didn't just simply preach the love of God, he lived out God's love. His view on the Lord's Supper was excellent. I love all that Zwingli wrote on that subject. His view was right in line with what I believe is the clear teaching in Scripture, and I wish more people would read his wise instruction on that subject. Finally, he had some excellent quotes on the gospel, such as, "Now since he who was innocent suffered death for us guilty sinners, he paid off for us the beautiful righteousness of God, which otherwise no human being is able to satisfy. Thus, he earned for us the right to come to God by virtue of his free grace and gift. Whoever hears this and believes it, without doubt, shall be saved." That is the gospel. So that's a great quote on the gospel coming to us as a result of Christ's work and then us receiving it as a free gift. It's awesome. And then Zwingli, he goes and ruins his view on the gospel, for me at least, by saying that if we don't persevere in good works, we lose the gift, which then is a good springboard to talk about the things I don't like about Zwingli. Can't stand his view on baptism. I think he was foolish to not go along with the Anabaptists and accept believers' baptism along with his memorial view for the Lord's Supper. I think his continued support for infant baptism was probably founded more on his desire to have the church reflect the nation of Israel in the Old Testament than anything found specifically in the Bible. Zwingli wanted a church that covered both believers and unbelievers, which then led to his development of covenant theology that has been steering people wrong for the last 500 years. But probably the worst aspect of his teaching was his view on hard determinism. I think his views of God's sovereignty, instead of solving the problem of evil, turns God into a monster who is causing all the evil. To say that David's sin with Bathsheba and murder of Uriah were determined and the will of God, that defames God's name. His will is not for men to commit adultery and murder, and it puts God on the same level as the worst of sinners. I believe hard determinism is the view in the church that most reflects paganism, and it was disheartening to see Ulrich Zwingli follow those views. Finally, what was the worst part of his life and ministry was his support of the murder of the Anabaptists, who, this is just where he's at his worst. It's terrible. It's inexcusable. You can't just say it is something of the time and brush it under the rug. Balthasar Hubmaier even came to Zwingli looking for refuge, and Hubmaier himself had a well-developed theology on why Christians shouldn't murder other Christians over doctrine. And it's a shame that Zwingli couldn't learn from a man like Hubmaier. So like I said, when it came to Zwingli the man, there is this really weird mixed bag. Some things I love, some things I hate, but it's really a fascinating journey to take, and I want to encourage you to take that journey with Stephen Eccher as your guide to learn about Zwingli the pastor who seemed to always be at war.